There was a time when mid-engine supercars in lurid colours were exclusively the preserve of a handful of European manufacturers, and at eye-watering prices. Not anymore. I cannot remember a car that has had more hype surrounding it than this, the Chevrolet C8 Corvette. First it was never coming to Australia, then it was, then it wasn't, and now it is, and here it is. I'm so excited to get my hands on this car, and we are the first in Australia to experience this machine. There's only 3 in the country right now, and there is so much to talk about. This car is being imported by GMSV, and unlike the Camaro and the Ram and the Silverado, this car isn't converted in Australia to right-hand drive. It's made on Chevrolet's production line as a right-hand drive, and that's the only vehicle of its kind. There's only about 200 of these coming to Australia every year, but that hasn't stopped this car generating a huge amount of interest. There's tons to look at, but I want to start with a closer look at the styling. I feel I'm going to make a few enemies here because the styling of the C8 just doesn't resonate completely with me. At the front end, all is well. Look at that. Superb, aggressive stance, and it looks just like a Corvette should. But when you get round to the side, it all starts to go a little awry. Starting with that wheel, that's a 19-inch wheel, and to me it looks small in that huge acres of bodywork and big deep wheel arch. And the offset is all wrong as well. Look how far back that tyre sits from the edge of the wheel arch. It looks like an old E-Type or something. The elegant roofline from the nose to about the midpoint is perfect, looks just like a sports car should. But when you get to here, it's like the design team hadn't done the module on how to design a mid-engine car, and it just all goes blocky and huge expanses of bodywork. And again, that wheel is 20 inches at the back. Have you ever known a car that makes a 20-inch wheel look smaller? Unfortunately, it's the same at the tail, where I feel the design of the C8 Corvette and the Honda Civic Type R went out to dinner, and there's all these unnecessary accentuated black bits, and I don't know, it just doesn't need to be that aggressive at the back. This car could have been beautifully elegant and still aggressive and a muscle car. But there is so much more to this car than just the way it looks. It'll cost you about an extra 14 grand, but you can have the C8 as a Targa top. But when you want to enjoy the sunshine, you don't have to leave the roof at home. They've cleverly engineered a spot for it in the boot. That is one of many excellent engineering features in this car, and there's another one right there. The huge news with this car is that after more than 60 years of production, the Corvette has finally gone mid-engined. Now that's a huge deal. To go from a traditional front-engine rear-wheel drive sports car to re-engineering the whole thing from the ground up so that the engine is now behind us, mid-mounted, that is a significant investment of time, interest and money. The reason they've done it, of course, is for dynamics, and I'm very happy to report that the results are absolutely spectacular, but we'll come back to that a little bit later after we've talked about the engine itself. It's a 6.2 litre naturally aspirated LT2 V8. It also has push rods. Now I thought you could only find fossils of push rod engines these days, which makes it seem like a bit of a dinosaur, but perplexingly, it's also a super modern engine in other ways as well. For example, it's dry sumped now, and one of the best things about that is the engine sits super low in the chassis behind me, and the result of that is visibility. It's absolutely amazing in here. Forward view is excellent, but I've got a really good decent view out over the engine and behind. It's actually better than the Camaro in here. And the other thing about putting the engine right behind you is you can hear everything. It is so loud in here. But you don't just get an exhaust note like you would with the old Corvette. You get induction noise, you get timing chain rattle, you get the breathing and the exhaling. It's such an involving experience. Now it might feel like a bit of old technology back there, but the result is 369 kilowatts, and 637 Newton meters. That is plenty. In a car that weighs about 1,650 kilos. That might sound like a lot, but in a car of this size and stature, it's actually not, thanks to lots of aluminium construction and plastic body panels. And hanging off the back of that lovely V8 is an 8-speed Tremec automatic gearbox. For the first time, you can't get the Corvette as a manual, but I don't care because this gearbox is absolutely bloody brilliant. It's the very same unit you'll find behind the engine of the Maserati MC20, if you're wondering, and it provides rapid gear changes with a level of aggression that suits the car nicely. We're not talking levels of discomfort like a Lamborghini Aventador, but just urgent enough to know that you're in something as high performance as this thing. We've gone from a car that at one point in its life had leaf spring rear suspension, I kid you not, this is the flagship of Chevrolet's lineup, to having double wishbone suspension all round and mid-engined, and the transformation is absolutely eye-opening. The weight distribution is amazing. The second you turn into a corner in this thing, you can tell it's mid-engine. It'll do all the mid-engine kind of things you want it to. Weight transfer under braking will step the back out a little bit, and ultimately the limit of this chassis is in the front end grip. That might be tyres, it could be the way it's been deliberately set up. We've got Michelin Pilot Sport 4S all round in here, so plenty of grip. But seriously, it is a staggering change. So much grip in the corners. The steering is beautifully positive. Enough weight there to know what's going on, but not enough to build up arms like Arnie. There's endless grip. I was lucky enough to spend some time on the track in this car, and honestly, it deserves the title of supercar. What this thing can do is well worthy of pedigree stature. 369 kilowatts, doesn't sound like supercar material? Then think again and take my word for it. What this car can do absolutely deserves the status of supercar. It's astonishing. And then there's the cabin. I haven't seen a cabin this radical since Tesla decided to put a portrait mounted screen the same size as my home entertainment system in the middle of their dash. Do I like it? Does it necessarily work for me? Well, not entirely. A square steering wheel? Come on. Push button switches to open the door? They make me anxious, like they're going to go wrong and I'll get stuck in here on a hot day. Okay, there is an emergency release down there, but just because I'm paranoid, it doesn't mean people aren't following me around, does it? And what about all these switches down the middle here? Do they have to be moved off the dash and segregate people from the other side of the cabin? Probably not. But whether I like it or not doesn't matter. What I love is that they did it. It's a bold move, and throwing tradition out of the window has garnered a lot of respect from me for this car. The cabin layout is unashamedly for the driver. Now, I don't mean just tilting the odd display towards me. I mean literally there's a barrier between me and whoever the unfortunate soul is sitting in that left seat. I suppose it doesn't matter, this car is all about the owner and the driver, but it would be nice to not treat the person to my left like such a meanie. Now, when I'm not driving like a maniac, which, let's be honest, in a Chevrolet Corvette is not much of the time, the ride is suspiciously good. I don't mean good for a car of this class, I mean good for pretty much any car. And partly the secret to that is MagnaRide dampers. With a flick of this drive mode switch down here, I can go from the more sporty track and sport modes to touring, and there's no body roll, but it somehow manages to absorb lumps and bumps in the road, which I swear were going to break the windscreen or my neck. It is absolutely brilliant. And the result is a car which you'd quite happily spend many, many hours at the wheel of. But when you really do want to let your hair down, I do have those aforementioned drive modes. Now, track, MagnaRide stiffens up that suspension, and combined with that mid-engine weight distribution, beautiful steering feel, this car is doing things I was absolutely not expecting it to be able to do. And the braking. We don't have expensive carbon ceramic rotors at each corner and 10-piston calipers. It's just good old-fashioned bread and butter engineering, and the result is wonderful. It works so well. There's one final thing though that can really make this car stand out, and it's a button on the dash with a little Z on it. Press that and I bring up the Z mode, and in there you can change so many different parameters. Traction control, the engine noise, that's obviously going to be maximum. Even the brake feel, I can actually change how progressive the pedal feels under hard braking. But all of that can come with the softest, most comfortable suspension settings. So you've got a purely bespoke way of driving this car just at the press of a button. It's not the first time anyone's done that. BMW does it with its M mode, and Audi does it with RS, but it's actually a really lovely level of sophistication for a car I wasn't expecting it from. If you couldn't already tell, I like this car a lot. Frankly, I like it a lot more than I was expecting to. And that's before I even come to my favourite part, the price. The Corvette range starts from about $150,000. Just take a moment to digest that. Yes, $150,000. So about the same as a mid-spec Mercedes-Benz SUV. Or how about this for a comparison? That Lamborghini at the start of this video, you could spend the same amount that it cost to buy this car on options alone. And that's taken this vehicle from compelling to an absolute bargain. Perhaps its looks will grow on me, or perhaps they won't. But it doesn't really matter, because there's a lot of people out there, perhaps you included, that love the way this car looks, and it will sell largely on those aesthetics alone. But what's undeniable about this car is it's taken a quantum leap into new territory. It manages an almost impossible balancing act of taking traditions from past Corvettes, but also balancing it with new technology and incredibly refined engineering. For the first time ever, the Corvette is sledgehammering its way into the 21st century. You may remember that way back in 2015, a top secret prototype was caught testing. It was nicknamed Blackjack, and it took the basis of a VE Ute, but behind the cabin was a mid-mounted V8. That car went on to become the production version of the C8 Corvette. And while this car is as American as deep-fried Elvis, if you know how to look at it right, you can still see a little bit of that Aussie that lies within.